everyone, and welcome to another Headline Books Christmas Extravaganza session. Today we have very special guests with us. We have author, actor, award-winning author, and actor David Selby with us today with guest interviewer Burke Allen from Allen Media Strategies. So we want to invite you all to ask questions. So if you would like David to answer anything, please type your questions into the comments section of this video and we'll get to questions at the end. We'll get to as many as we have time for today. Also, if you are interested in purchasing any of the books that we are going to be discussing today, there will also be links here in the comments for those because we're coming up on the holidays. So if you're looking for some gifts, the links will be right there for you. So I would like to introduce you to our guest interviewer today, Burke Allen, who's going to take it away. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Hey, thank you so much, Ashley. And Ashley Belote there has been on the nice list, not the naughty list this holiday season. I cannot say the same, though, about our guest interviewee, my pal David Selby, who joins us somewhere hunkered down in coastal Carolina. Hello, sir. Thanks for being with us today.
Coastal California.
How about that? Yeah, there you are. You have not been, you said, in Los Angeles since March, right, but you're within eyeshot of the ocean, so it's not all bad.
Not all. No, it's not all bad. Not at all. Very blessed.
You know, David, you we're going to talk about your books, and I'm going to ask you. I'll tell you right now. I'll put you on the spot and have you read something from one of the books in a bit. But we would do a disservice to all the folks who are watching today from all over the country and even overseas if we didn't talk about your long career as an actor. And I'd love to go all the way back to the role that I think, for the most part, people first noticed this young, good-looking, strapping Appalachian mountain boy from West Virginia, and that's your role on Dark Shadows. And there's some pictures of you. When you look at that kid, does that seem like it was a million years ago, or does it seem like yesterday?
Oh, no, a few years have gone by. A few years have passed. But I was very blessed to have that show come into my life at such a young age because so many fans they have hung on through the years and with me, and so I've been very blessed to have them at the different venues, wherever it's stage, film, readings such as today or whatever. That show came along in my life, and I had no idea at the time what it was going to be, but a couple of my friends, a lovely man his name was Bob Cobert, and Bob composed all of the music on that show, Dark Shadows. He recently passed away, but he's the one who wrote Quentin's theme, and they wrote words to it, and so many things that came out of that show. So many good friends.
How old were you in these photos that we see of you in Dark Shadows? Because if you look,
mid-20s.
That was your first big national thing, right?
Yeah, on the whole. I had done a show right before that about young Abe Lincoln for ABC. But it was about the same time, may have been just a little bit before Dark Shadows. But Dark Shadows came about because, for me, because of I went in to meet I had been over at a place called the Actors Studio, and someone suggested I go meet another agent, and I did. And while I was there at their offices, they suggested I go meet a casting lady. I did. Her name was Marion Doherty, and Marion was responsible for bringing a lot of stage actors into the possibility of doing film and television. So she put me in a cab, paid the fare, the cab fare, went with me, and I did a scene before the creator in his office. The creator Dan Curtis, and Dan had been a professional golfer. And so I had to clear the golf balls off the floor before I did the scene. But Marion stuck with me. She was a lovely lady, and the first thing she asked me at her office was, "Where have you been?" And that made me reflect on a lot of things over the years. Where have I been? And so here I am today, Burke, again with you.
Well, I'm happy to have you today. And if you're just joining us in the holiday extravaganza, the Christmas book season is here, and you can pick up a book from David and have it personally autographed for you at headlinebooks.com. When they brought you the script for Dark Shadows, and that's a pretty out there show, did you think, this is really nutty? What am I doing here? This is a horror show, and it's like a soap opera, and it's this whole blending of things. Yeah. Did you think it was out there and had no chance? Did you have any inkling it was going to do well?
I had no idea about the show. The only thing I knew was that Joan Bennett was committed to the show. She was doing it. And Joan and I became dear friends. Her and then later husband and my wife, Chip, we all became friends. But Joan and I got along. She was so wonderful to me. And of course, I knew her sister, Constance Bennett. And then their father was an actor, Richard. But anyway, it was just a lovely, I don't know, one of those opportunities that came my way, and I met so many people because of it. I remember one day getting a call, and they said, "David, Joanne Woodward is on the phone." And I said, "Oh." So I said, "Hello." And she said, "David, I have to tell you, this call is not for me, it's for my mother. Can she come to the studio and watch you film?" And I said, "Certainly." So she did. We became fast friends, and the same with Joanne, and later her husband Paul. We all became. It was a lovely friendship, and continued for many years. And Joanne today, God bless her.
Not a bad way to go for a West Virginia boy. And since you and I have West Virginia in common, we've got to talk a little bit about that. I wonder, how much growing up in West Virginia, in the heart of those Appalachian Mountains, you've taken with you in this long career. I mean, you've been able to hang in there and work steadily as an actor for 5 decades. That's a pretty wonderful thing for a kid from the Mountain State. So what do you take with you from West Virginia when you go out into the outside world?
Oh my goodness, everything that the people taught me when I was a kid living there. And that's why most of the things I've written about, to a certain extent, have to do with West Virginia and the people that I met, grew up with, my teachers. Having the opportunity of living in a college town and being able to go to school there without costing me an arm and a leg. So all of that, and then working, my first professional job, I went to New York for a couple of days once and got lost and went back to West Virginia, to Morgantown, and then got a job down in Beckley, West Virginia, where I met Patty Meyer, Kathy Teets, in a place called Beckley, West Virginia. And they had an outdoor drama there called Honey in the Rock, written by Kermit Hunter. And it was a lovely time. And I think because of, it was because of, I met Patty's friend who lived across the street, Chippy Newman, and convinced Chippy to go on the road with me, or she convinced me we're going to do this. So we're, after all these years, we're still together, and it's just 2 West Virginia kids still making do.
What an amazing story too. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you've been married to Chip all these years, and that's something of an anomaly in what you do for a living. And I know you've been asked this before, but I got to ask you again, what's the secret there? How do you make that work in that industry for that long?
Oh, I don't know. You marry the right person who won't let you give up, who continues to fight to find the joy of life, you know, and to be blessed with what we have. So it was, for me, it was, you know, always pretty easy because, you know, I got my biggest fan living with me.
See, I love that. You got that aw shucks West Virginia thing still going for you, and it's very genuine. David Selby is our guest, by the way, today on our Christmas extravaganza for my friends at Headline Books. If you'd like to pick up one of David's books, he'll sign it for you. You can put it under the tree at headlinebooks.com. We have fans that are going to start chiming in with questions, and if you have them, put them in the chat room for us. Hey, I want to look at a little bit more of your TV and film work as we go along. And before we leave the Dark Shadows piece, you actually got to come back and do some voice work for that show pretty recently.
Well, you mean for Dark Shadows?
Yeah.
I mean, well, we did, we had a gathering about, a month ago of some of the original actors on the show. And that was very special, getting together with them. And we've remained great friends over all these years. And so, again, that's another one of the blessings that came out of it, that you met such wonderful people, wonderful actors, and still to this day, we stay in touch.
Hey, wait a minute. There's some pictures of you here on Falcon Crest. And
oh, yes, I see that.
I know enough, David, about this show to know that you started as kind of a bad guy, and then you became kind of a good guy, and then you became the big guy on this show. And they sort of revolve the whole thing around you. But I also know that you're in an embrace there, and that is not your wife. Who is that woman that's hugging up on you there?
Oh, that's Susan Sullivan, isn't it? You're Susan and I. In fact, I just left her a telephone message yesterday or the day before. We talk, you know, not infrequently. So we were going to try and do something together. We did a play out here in Los Angeles a few years back. It was, we were very pleased with it. It was delightful, written by Edward Albee, but it was a lovely piece. The Falcon Crest show, again, now this was with, of course, Jane Wyman, and you see all of the people there on on who's, yes, oh my goodness, Anna, Alicia, just everybody. There's Susan, Margaret Ladd, you know, and so we had a good time with that show. Again, I got lucky because when I was doing Dark Shadows, I met a man in the parking lot beside the studio. And it was down on West 53rd Street in New York on the west side, West 53rd, between 9th and 10th. And the parking lot guy had some, I don't know, friendships with people. And he told me one day, he said, hey, listen, friends of mine have started a new show called Walton's Mountain, The Waltons. And they said the man in charge of that's Earl Hamner. And he said, that's a show I think you should do. So after Dark Shadows ended, my wife and I were on a trip to Los Angeles. Really, it was our first time, or second time. Anyway, I got a call, and it was to go meet Earl Hamner about doing an episode of The Waltons. So I did, and the character that I played on that episode of The Waltons, he was the only character to ever kiss Olivia Walton, besides her husband at that time, played by the wonderful actor Ralph Waite. But anyway, I did that episode, and I came back later. Earl was in charge of Falcon Crest. It was another one of his. So I got a call from him one day when I was out there, and I came out to do a show for Lorimar called Flamingo Road, but Earl was there, and he said, when Flamingo Road was over, he pulled me aside and he said, listen, I'd love for you to do Falcon Crest. So sure enough, a couple of weeks later, I was back in New York and we got a call, and we moved to California. So that's that's how, you know.
And with Falcon Crest, you started as not sort of the central character in that show, but I'd read somewhere that while you were filming, the legendary actress Jane Wyman, who we saw there, her health took a turn for the worst, and so you began to sort of cover and make up some of that ground. Is that right? Is that how it kind of all played out?
I don't remember. You know, Jane and I remained friends until she moved to Palm Springs, and still we were friends to the end. We used to go to dinner together. Whenever we shot on location up in the Napa Valley in California, wine country, we always stayed at the same hotel together. And actually, sometimes I'd stay next door. And late in the afternoon, after we finished shooting, we would gather. I mean, she and I would gather in her room and have a glass of wine in her apartment. But that's, you know, I always was a dear friend of Joan's, but the only time she had a couple of problems, you know, health-wise during the thing, but I don't know. She was, as far as I know, when I was there, she never missed standing up and knowing her lines, and she was just a professional through and through.
David Selby is our guest today, and you've gotten a chance to work with some real Hollywood royalty like Jane Wyman and you know, opposite Barbara Streisand. I want to look at some of those
good old films. Go watch some of Jane's early films.
Incredible! What an incredible actress, and it has to be an incredible treat for you to have been able to do that.
Same with Joan. I mean, with Jane Wyman. Same with Joan with in New York. With John Bennett.
Yeah. Incredible. What a great life. You're a lucky West Virginia guy. One of our viewers said, West Virginia. So that's where that adorable accent comes from. David Selby, our guest today. He is an author as well as a longtime character actor, leading man in Hollywood for over 5 decades. 5 decades now. Hey, I want to ask you some questions that are coming in from our viewers about the craft of writing. And I promise for the folks that are here for TV and radio stuff and television stuff and movie stuff for David, we'll get to all that. But David, I want to get to some of our viewer questions about writing. One of the questions comes from Sheila, and Sheila wants to know if you started writing as a young man while you were doing Dark Shadows, or if your writing came afterwards. When did you start writing?
My writing came afterwards. The first thing I started, I believe I wrote a poetry book about my early years in West Virginia, by the way. So it came afterwards. I wrote a book called My Mother's Autumn while I was on the road doing a play with Ellen Burstyn. So I wrote about my mother. The book is called My Mother's Autumn. And it was about my mother who grew up in the northern part of West Virginia, actually in a coal mining town, Brady, and then in what then became Edwards, or down the road from Edwardsville. Her father was a coal miner. Born in Scotland, moved to this country. They moved him down, I think, out of, I'm going to say some from Canada, down into West Virginia, into a coal camp. And he and my grandmother started their lives there. And Mom was one of their children, and she decided that she didn't want her children ever going into the coal mines. So that was a no starter for her. So I never had any argument with that. And so but My grandfather was a Scottish coal miner, and I don't know, just good coal mining people up in that part of West Virginia at the time.
Amanda in Oceanport, New Jersey wants to know how you write. Do you write on a typewriter, on a laptop? Do you write it out longhand? Do you sit at a desk? Do you write outside? Do you write inside? How do you do it to get those creative juices going?
I used to write. I tell her I used to write. If you could hear me there, I used to write in longhand. Legal sheets, yellow pad or whatever. But then I converted over to the computer and writing on the, and it took me a while to get that. But that's how I still do it. Although a lot of times when I'm out, if I have a thought or whatever, a poem or whatever, I'll write a line down here or line down there, so I still use, pen and paper or pencil and paper, but I still write on the computer. And while I'm writing, sometimes I'll have a question, so I can always try to Google, or I'll look up a fact in West Virginia. A lot of the books early on were West Virginia based or ideas from, and so I could, talk to people about back in West Virginia. So the answer is I use both, but then I converted, like a lot of people, over to the computer. But anyway.
I've got another question that's come in from Amy Colhane. She says, Mr. Selby, I'm a writer and a creative writing teacher. I'm curious about your working in different genres. You've written poetry, fiction, nonfiction. Could you talk a little bit about what you like about working in each of those different genres?
Well, good question. Poetry has its own, challenges to be whatever, to use the imagery. Not that you don't do that in all writing, but to kind of come to some kind of condensing. I remember there was a poem, and maybe somebody, so much depends. What was the name of the writer? So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow barrel glazed with rainwater, standing beside the white chickens. There were so many, poets, and there was a teacher at West Virginia University. His name was Rolf Foster, Dr. Foster, and a great teacher. So a lot of the teachers were inspiration, in that kind of thing. But I enjoy all of the poetry, fiction. I've had a bit of I've had more than a bit, only because since the pandemic, I've had a bit of a writer's block. I go out and I work in my garden, and that comes from my grandparents. Both grew they were both gardeners of sorts. And so I got doing that, and there was a great art teacher in West Virginia, and his name was Joe Moss. And Joe, he was just a wonderful art teacher, and it was my art teacher. You can Google him, Joe Moss in West Virginia. He was a very well-known West Virginian artist. But he's the one that told me, Selby, you do good work, just not enough of it. So that always stuck with me. So I've tried, in answer to that question, to go from fiction to write fiction. But a lot of the books are certainly based upon places I've been, people I've known, stories that I've heard, stories that people have told me.
Listen, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to pay your agent a percentage, but I'm going to ask, would you read a little something? Do you have any of your books within reach there that you could read something to us?
Yeah, I'm just going to have a couple that are, these were published and the reason this is special to me is because Chippy Newman grew up across the street from Patty and Kathy, the publishers at Headline Books, Kathy's company. And I couldn't believe it when she offered to, you know, to publish a couple of my books. I thought that was very special. And her daughter, Ashley, has been, you know, Ashley, I think, even designed the cover. Or anyway, one of these books is called Promises of Love. Promises of Love. And this has to do, it was loosely based on my wife's father and the life of the people, where they came from. He and his wife came from down in Louisiana. Well, Doc Newman was born in Virginia, but then later he ended up down there going to LSU. I mean, he was in med school and he met this lovely nurse who became his wife later on. And he became a doctor. And he was a man that so inspired me because of his commitment, his dedication, he just wouldn't rest from being a doctor, from Promises of Love. So it was his love of medicine that drove him. And then it was his love of his daughter, whom I was fortunate enough to end up with, he was quite disturbed when he realized that his daughter was about to marry, and did marry, as he said, a wannabe actor. In fact, he was crying the day we left the house. This is about his commitment to medicine, to finding something, the joy of something that all of us do in the discovery of life. It's what we all are fighting for today. We all need to come together to discover the joy that we have in each other. His joy was out with his wife because she was a nurse, and his sister was also a nurse who stayed with him all the years of his being in medicine. My hand moved with the assuredness that comes from being totally absorbed in the only thing I ever wanted to do, to be the best surgeon I could possibly be. Medicine, surgery, was my passion, my obsession, the only place where I fully rejoiced. I took pride in self-denial with an uncommon discipline to abstain from anything I considered harmful, anything that would take me away from doctoring. Even my love of music had taken a back seat to medicine. He had gone to college on a violin scholarship, music scholarship. I had long given up my youthful habit of devouring any football or baseball statistic. There were no activities aside from church, watching Gregory Peck movies, and attending the local Rotary Club luncheons. I slept, operated, and talked medicine. I read nothing but medical journals. And the day he passed away, there was a medical journal, it's very moving, lying on his chest. He read nothing but medical journals and the occasional cursory glance of the sports page, but nothing else of the morning paper. I was tireless in keeping up with the latest medical advances, studying relentlessly, never letting myself go into the operating room without knowing I was as prepared as humanly possible. It was essential that my life be devoted to being a good surgeon. I was doing what I wanted to do. My childhood had receded. fortune had smiled on me. My fellow doctors maintained that if any one of them had to go under the knife, it was Dr. Dan they wanted wielding it. So that's just part of the beginning of a chapter in the book called Promises of Love. And later what happens is, I don't mean to give away the story, but his ambition had been to go to Harvard. And he didn't get there. He didn't get there. So he wanted his daughter, this is in the book. He wanted his daughter to go to a good school. And there was only one school for him. That was Harvard. So lo and behold, during this process of the book, she gets into Harvard and graduates from Harvard and becomes a tenured professor at Harvard. Now, my wife went to another school. It was all, it was a women's college, a good, very wonderful school. But then she went on and completed her degrees and taught in college. Anyway, that's from Promises of Love. Do you want me to continue reading, or we'll talk and then I'll read some more?
You know, I could listen to you read all day, David. That was fantastic. I think you've read a script or two in your life, and have you ever done the audio book versions of any of your books?
No.
You would be, you know, incredible at that. I should also mention, if you would like to pick up any of David's books, including Promises of Love, they're available at headlinebooks.com. There's also a direct link to the Kindle edition of that book, so you could like press that button and get it downloaded to your Kindle right now if you want to get inside David Selby's mind. Would you mind to read a little bit more for us? And then I promised all the folks who are asking the movie and TV questions, we'll get to them.
You want me to read from another book?
Sure. What do you got there?
Well, I've got A Casualty of Indifference. Now, this is a much tougher story in a way. Now, I'll read you some dialogue first in the story. I don't know whether you are familiar with this one or not, but I can't remember. Anyway, this is about a young woman, and she puts aside her budding singing career to try and solve the mystery of her sister's killing. And so that's what she does. And she gets to know these people at a bar up on some top of mountain in southern Appalachia. And the bar is called Dead End. And Dead End comes from a street sign that I saw outside right in a neighborhood in Charleston, West Virginia once. And as many times as we had driven down there, I never noticed a sign. And it was, it sparked a bit of a laugh from us. It was called Dead End. And it was a road sign because the road did dead end. But right behind the sign, right started, was a cemetery. So we always thought, oh my goodness, how have we missed this? You know, anyway, the bar up on top of the mountain's called Dead End, and all these guys gather there and they, you know, pass the time and talk about the various things of life. And Mary Ellen has a job there because she's trying to learn a little bit about her sister's murder, because her sister used to hang out at this bar all the time. And Mary Ellen says, "Here you go," said Mary Ellen, handing Doc a scotch and water. "Thank you, my dear." "Coach, I'll say gold fishing," said Doc, "but all the fish have been poisoned." "Oh, I'm more mellow now," said the coach. "Well, I was mellow until this morning," said Doc. "I couldn't brush my teeth." "Yeah, it's not like I used to be," said Coach. "You can't coach the same way. Doesn't work anymore. I used to put the kids through boot camp, but it was too much. For so long, I blamed myself for everything. If a kid fumbled, I should have passed. Sure as I'd pass, there'd be an interception. Every loss tells me I'm not a good man. Despite the loss, I tell my players to keep their heads up. I have to tell myself that. It's not easy. My advice, coach, said Dewey. Dewey was the owner of the bar. Next season, muddy up the field, make the players wallow around in slop like hogs. Don't cater to them. Don't tell them they're the best thing since sliced bread. Tell them they're terrible. If they don't improve, cut them. I wouldn't end practice till a player hits one of those pine trees hard enough for a pine cone to fall. Anyway, it goes on, and these guys talk to each other, and eventually they come within. Mary Ellen works her, her warm way, she's hard to say no to, into the kind graces of the men, and they proceed to help her get to the bottom of her sister's killing. And then Mary Ellen, she goes and enters a voice contest, a singing contest, and she wins. And everybody was saying, oh, well, now, Mary Ellen, you have to leave now. You got to go live in Nashville, because that's where all the singers go from up this way. Well, West Virginia was Mary Ellen's home, and appearing on national television had not changed that. The place was in her soul. On her return to West Virginia, in the parade honoring her, she was perched in a convertible with the high school marching band leading the way. West Virginia and American flags lined the streets of the town. The town was called Last Chance. The mayor, the coach, the team, the coal miners, they were all among the hundreds, practically everyone in the county who had turned out to welcome Mary Ellen home. Nothing, and this is true, nothing mountaineers love more than another mountaineer doing well out in the world. They loved her despite her not winning the contest. Mary Ellen gained a new appreciation of home, a new perspective, a realization of how much she loved West Virginia. She understood that her town, Last Chance, had been waiting a long time for redemption. The mountains would be Mary Ellen's story, whether she left or stayed. She forgot the clamor about how her life would go nowhere if she stayed in her beloved mountains. Her success as a West Virginia didn't mean she had to stay. She had shown the whole country what she could do, no matter where her heart took her. As she stood that wonderful day with her parents before the crowd that gathered in the town's little center, she sang a song of thank you to all the folks who had supported her. And to my sister, Trudy, who was and will always be my inspiration. And then she sings a song. And if anyone's heard this song, I don't know. I wrote this song. This is my home where I belong. Just to be is my dream. Ride a cloud to the sea, swing high on beauty's vine, sweetly free and oh, so fine. The places I could be, but Hollywood and Vine is not where I want to be. This is my home, where I belong. No need to swirl and twirl. I'm just a hillbilly girl, feeling the cool breeze of autumn's eve, waiting for time to bring me home again to you. Just to be is my dream on the mountain tonight with only God's moonbeam. What a beautiful sight. So pure is his light. Don't need to be a star, drive a big fancy car, be a money-making machine seen in People magazine. This is my home where I belong. No need to swirl and twirl, 'cause I'm just a hillbilly girl, feeling the cool breeze of autumn's eve, waiting for time to bring me home again to you. Just to be is my dream, and if I never pass the night on this mountaintop scene, I know God will make it right. His wind will hold me tight. I don't need to be seen on Entertainment Tonight. This is my home where I belong. No need to swirl and twirl. I'm just a hillbilly girl, feeling the cool breeze of autumn's eve, waiting for time to bring me home again to you.
I feel like I've got a front row seat for a master class in writing and in reading. David Selby, our guest today. That's fantastic. And that's A Casualty of Indifference, just one of David's books, available from Headline Books as part of the Christmas extravaganza. And a great little song that you wrote there. You could almost, you could hear the melody.
I wrote a book of, actually not that long, but I did write a book of songs.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right. Thanks to everyone who has patiently waited. We're going to get through some of the questions. We're also going to take a look at some more of your many roles that you've done down through the years. I'll ask a couple of these quickly for you. Did you ever consider writing a book? You have so many of these Dark Shadows fans after all these years, a book about the Dark Shadows characters. Would you ever do that?
About the Dark Shadows characters?
Yeah.
I might consider, I've considered a book with the title, Where Have You Been? And it starts out with the story that I told you earlier about the Dark Shadows episode where I first became acquainted with the folks over at Dark Shadows. And then writing about some of the things that happened while I was doing Dark Shadows. And some of the actors that have become became then dear friends and have remained so over the years.
Got it. All right, fair enough. One of the writers says, David, I'm rewatching the show now that I'm retired. I haven't seen it since I was in my early teens. I'm 66 now. The show's better than I remembered. I saw the Halloween special, the Dark Shadows cast. It was wonderful. Do you ever go back and watch your old stuff or catch something on TV or, catch a movie on Netflix or Amazon Prime and watch yourself and remember again what it was like to be on set doing that particular show?
It's funny, but I rarely, no, unless it's an accident. I don't recall having seen a Dark Shadows episode even in many years. I haven't seen any of the films, although this is funny. One day we're watching a film where we see where it's just coming up on our screen on the television, and we said, oh my God. And we watched the film. It was a film I did with some wonderful actors, Jason Robards, Jason, a dear friend, and we had done something else together, a project called Washington Behind Closed Doors, which I have not seen since we made it. But this one just happened. And we watched this film called Raise the Titanic. The film was not nearly as bad as it was a good film. And the music composition behind it was wonderful. I was just knocked out by it. And again, I thought, oh my goodness. So that made me feel all right. But I have not gone back. Years ago, I went and watched, there were a couple of films, a director, Quentin Tarantino. Mr. Tarantino owns, he did, a movie theater in LA. And there was another guy, a friend of his, who was a big fan of a film I did years ago called Super Cops. And I hadn't seen it since. So Quentin invited a group of us down to see the film at his theater. So that was fun. But unless it's a special occasion or something, no, the answer is I have not seen. I haven't seen an episode of Falcon Crest since the show closed.
It's It's kind of hard to get away from you on TV and Netflix, though, because you're in so many damn movies and TV shows that I will stumble across you just out of nowhere. And since we've become pals, I had no idea you were in this movie. I have another friend, Chris Ellis, who's a great character actor. He did a part in a movie with Angie Harmon and Cuba Gooding Jr. He played a police officer. And you were in scenes that he was never in with Angie Harmon, and I had no idea you were in that movie. You were kind of a nutty, crazy guy in that movie, too.
Probably.
And you've had some of those. You mentioned Raise the Titanic. You won a Golden Raspberry Award for that movie. Did that get under your skin? Were you aggravated when that happened, or did you laugh at all?
Not at all. I'll tell you the truth. Again, that's a film that goes back because Jason, I knew Jason Robards, and I was in an office one day, and Jason was talking to a producer, and the producer hands me the phone and says, Jason wants to talk to you. And so Jason got on and he said, David, we got to do this film. Says they're going to take us all over the world, take our families too. And the original producer was an English lord. His name was Sir Lou Gray. And sure enough, they did. They lived up to their word. They took us around the world. We shot that Christmas we spent in London. And then we went down to Land's End where we filmed down there. And it was just, it was a terrific, it was a terrific experience on the whole. It really was.
You ever take jobs, David, just because they're going to like take you to really cool places and you get a long vacation? Do you ever, tell your agent, yeah, I kind of like that one because I want to go there. I want to see that place.
I don't know. I took that job mainly because Jason said, hey, let's do this. And sure enough, it turned out to be, from that standpoint, terrific. A picture just came up on my film, on my thing with, I see Hume Cronin standing there.
Yeah,
and
how about that?
I did a film together years ago, and we're sitting out there talking during a break, and I don't know, somehow the Barter Theater in Abington, Virginia, which is just down the road off of southern West Virginia, down in Abington, Virginia.
Right.
The most beautiful theater you've ever been in. If anybody hasn't been there, you go to the Barter Theater. But Hume Cronin and the man who started, can't come up with his name, the Barter Theater. So Hume and I were talking, and Hume finally says, David, when were you at the Barter Theater? And I told him, and he said, well, I was there in 1929. He said, I helped start that theater. And they had taken a curtain and some seats, I think, out of the old Palace Theater in New York. This was during the Depression. They went down and told the people of Abington, if you will give us food, provide us with some meals, we will put on plays for you. And that's how the name Barter came up. And when I was there,
I never knew that. Wow.
A couple of kids came with a kitty. And the kitty, they bartered for a couple of tickets to the show. My wife took that kitty home from the barter. We took it, and that kitty stayed with us for the next 18 years. And Sophie was the cat's name. She, named after a character in the play I was doing. Anyway, the kitty is buried. Dear Sophie's buried in Toluca Lake, California.
Man, oh man. Well, and I'm looking at this picture of you with Hume Cronin, and you have worked with so many Hollywood legends. Your career sort of, David, just because of the timing, straddled old Hollywood and then new Hollywood. And I wonder if when you work with guys like Hume Cronin, I mean, are you a little starstruck? I mean, are there times when, at least in the beginning, when you try not to fanboy all over people like that? Or Jane Wyman?
Sure. I mean, years ago, I was in Boston with Jane Alexander. Jane's a lovely actress. And in fact, I just saw a movie with her the other day with Michael Caine, made several years ago. But anyway, Jane lives up in Nova Scotia. But Jane and I were doing a play, Hedda Gabler, in Boston. And I get a knock on my dressing room door, and I open the door, and the lady says, hello, David. My name is Ruth Gordon. Now, if anyone knows who Ruth Gordon is, she was one of the greats of the early theater, and film. So it's occasions like that that come along. And that was one of the great things about doing even a show like Falcon Crest. I got to meet so many stars, to work with them. Kim Novak. I worked with a lovely lady, Jane Greer, who was Joan Bennett's good friend. Of course, Jane Wyman, Gina Lollobrigida. There were so many. Cliff Robertson, just so many. Theodore Bickel. Theodore Bickel was in the first musical I ever saw in New York.
Fiddler on the Roof?
I saw Sound of Music. Okay,
yeah.
And I had $25 on me, and 17 of it went for a ticket. That was my first trip to New York. This picture behind me now, is at the Portrait Gallery in D.C. Yeah.
I recognize, I live in Washington, D.C. now, and I've been in that very spot where you're standing. And I want to ask you about Abe Lincoln, because you've got a very long relationship with our 16th president. Could you touch on that for the folks that aren't familiar with all the connections between you and President Lincoln?
Well, especially at this time that our country is in at the moment, it is very important. I mean, not important. You just can't help it to reflect on. In fact, today is an anniversary of sorts when Lincoln did the Gettysburg Address out at the cemetery, where the soldiers were buried. But anyway, Lincoln, I think about the Better Angels of Our Nature speech. There's so many speeches of Lincoln that are so appropriate. And my occasions to be at Ford's Theater, to be there during the last decade, and and so I got to present President Obama with a replica of the Gettysburg Address, actually. And got to go to the White House. He and Michelle, what a special person. But we had our photo taken, but with him. But anyway, the Lincoln years for me and Ford's Theater are so special to me. I remember doing the commemorative when Lincoln was assassinated, one of the most, moving times in my life. We went to DC, where I was to appear with several other people, Colin Powell being one. And I read a couple of Lincoln speeches in the theater. And after the performance, at the exact moment Lincoln was shot, the lights in the theater went dark. Everyone had a candle. Candles were lit, and we all walked outside the theater. Now, outside the theater, when daylight came up, Chippy and I, after a while, went home to the hotel because I was going to have to be there at daybreak next morning. Thousands of people were on the street in front of the theater and right over in front of the Peterson House where Lincoln had been taken. And so they duplicated that. So every half hour, whatever, a man would come out, soldier, and give an update on Lincoln. And finally he came out and said that the president had passed. At that time, there was an honor guard, the Marine Honor Guard, Army, Navy. They played in front of the theater. And then after that, I read Walt Whitman's Captain, Oh Captain, My Captain. And that was one of the most moving times. and the people had held vigil there all night. So the theater is still, the Ford's Theater, where Lincoln would go, is still vital. I was privileged enough to do the first play that the Ford's Theater had ever done about Lincoln. Till we did a new play there called The Heavens Are Hung in Black back in when President Obama started his administration. They had never done a play about Lincoln. They didn't want to there then, but they did, and subsequently we've done several, a few. Anyway.
You know, one of my favorite things, David, is to take, especially when my kids were younger, to take them to the Ford's Theater Christmas Carol.
Still going on.
Yeah, every year. And there's just something about walking into that building. You just feel the history all around you. And
yeah.
You can read more about David at davidselby.com. You can find out more about his long association with our 16th president. Oh, there he is in character. Look at that.
Yeah.
Nice. David Selby, our guest today. I've got a really sweet comment from a couple of fans, Sharon and Vicky, who says, we love and treasure everything, David, you've appeared in, from classic Dark Shadows, up to Sandbox with Barbara Streisand, the House of Dark Shadows films, your theater, your stage work, all the way up to, and for our younger viewers, the Batman classic animation. You were the voice of Commissioner Gordon.
Commissioner Gordon, yes.
How great is that, to span all those decades and do all these different genres? Is there one as an actor that is frankly more fun for you? Like, do you like doing comedy? Do you like doing drama? Do you like doing romance, the horror genre? Is there one that's more fun for you than others?
No, to tell you the truth, Burke, and I don't say this lightly, I have been blessed to do each and every one. I find the challenge of refining a joy in what you found, what I was lucky enough to find way back when I started, to rediscover those. I see Tell Me You Love Me up there with Jane Alexander.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. And there's Barbara Streisand.
Was it Barbara there? Yeah.
Look at that.
Up the Sandbox. Yeah.
Hey, this is not a bad life for a Morgantown, West Virginia boy, David Selby.
No.
You could have given this up a long time ago. And I thought recently, I was reading an article about Gene Hackman, who retired from acting, but has continued to write. He's a writer like you.
Yeah.
Do you ever see a time where you're gonna just write and no longer take acting roles?
Yeah, I don't know. Jane Alexander was her picture. Jane's, and she and I, we were talking via the phone a couple months ago now, but we're dear friends, and we were just talking about theater and whatever, and she decided that she was walking away, and I haven't quite reached that point, but I still, as long as I get a kick out of it. I see White Squall up there. Was that Jeff?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Well, Jeff just announced he had a form of, I believe, Alzheimer's. I'm not sure. Anyway, there's so many. I still find the joy, and sometimes it's, whatever, but I still, feel blessed when something comes my way. Now, admittedly, you do reach a point where you say, all right, I've been blessed. I'm happy. I'm contented. I'm going to continue writing. Continue whatever, enjoying my family, my grandkids. They keep me strong, keep me going.
Do you have another book in you?
Well, I have one I'm working on, and I have another one that I'm going to work on. You touched on that, going back to Dark Shadows and all the people that I met along the way. And I don't know, it'll be sort of a memory kind of thing, but this is from a play.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about that because we've gotten some comments as well. We haven't talked about your theater background, and you've done an awful lot of that too.
There's Mike, isn't that Michael Leonard on the couch, I believe? Michael.
Yep.
This is from a play called yeah. Yes, it's Michael. Michael and I, of course, go back all those years. And actually, Michael and I, we thought about doing a play about the Lincolns. But then it's, you know, like a lot of things, it didn't pan out or whatever. But Michael is a special actress.
It's got to be gratifying in that career that you've been able to hang in all these years, and these folks that you worked with as a young actor, like in the Waltons back in the early to mid 70s, you maintain those friendships down through the years. When you parachute sort of in and out of television shows or plays like this,
yeah,
how do you maintain those relationships? It's not like the way most people work, David, where you go in and you're with someone every day for years and years and years. You might go in and do a guest shot on TV. We saw, I think it was a Chicago Fire episode that you did recently, where you're only on set for a week or two, and those folks already have that chemistry. They're there all the time, but you might only come in for a week or two and do that. What's that dynamic like, and how do you gain a rapport with people that you don't have a relationship with?
Well,
like this cast, you were thrown into this cast of City of Conversation, with the exception of Michael Leonard. You probably didn't know any of those folks before. How do you make that work?
Well, there's always, not always, but if you're fortunate, sometimes there's somebody you work with, either on the crew. You mentioned Chicago Fire.
Right.
One of the actors, he lived in London, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, David, so glad that we're meeting and working here." And he had been a long time, man. And then one of the crew members, a couple of crew members came up and said, "David, you remember the film we did in Canada together?" So there's always that kind of thing. And the producers of that show are special. It's all quite, so when you generally, sometimes, because you've worked a lot over the years, there'll be some relationship, a lot of times.
Hey, look, the producers found that photo of you on the Waltons. Look at that.
With Michael Leonard?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Look at that. I'll be darned.
When you look at that kid, when you look at that young David Selby, could you have ever imagined you'd still be doing this 50 years later?
No. And that and that I'd be a grandfather. Fortunately, yeah, it's quite lovely to be able to look at Social Network.
This is another one. I bumped into you on this 4 nights ago. I was looking for something. I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old son, and I wanted to do something that would give him a look at college and the college experience.
Yeah.
He's beginning to look at colleges. We came across the Social Network, and damn if you weren't in that movie too.
Yeah. David Fincher's movie, it's called Mank. It just opened.
Okay.
About Mankiewicz, and it's Randolph Hearst. I actually went in and read in a group reading for David, but I read Randolph Hearst, and it wasn't any, and that role was played in the movie, which just came out yesterday or day before, by an actor named Charles Dance. I don't know if you've heard an English actor, but I was so delighted that movie, because that movie, Mank, was written by David. Now, David Fincher directed Social Network.
Right.
And Aaron Sorkin wrote the script. You knew right away you had a good script when you read it.
He writes incredible dialogue, and we actually had a question from somebody asking about how you memorize dialogue. I would imagine with an Aaron Sorkin script, something that's really wordy, it takes a lot of work. Is that a challenge for you? What's your technique to learn all those lines?
You remember, you only shoot so many pages a day. So, and there are only so many lines you have. Fortunately, in this, Jesse Eisenberg, right? Jesse had to carry the brunt of that, So, sometimes it's you have to, but you just have to study, and you do it enough. By the time you do a few takes or whatever, the lines will be there.
Well, you've made a lot of West Virginians very proud. As you said, we mountaineers are proud of our own when they go out into the world and do good. You have done very, very well for yourself. And I love that you continue to reach back and help your home state. We were just talking before we went on the air, and you won't mention it because you're far too humble to, so I will. David donated his time and talents to the Fall Festival in Charleston, West Virginia, this past autumn when they had to take that festival online and do it virtually. You make mountaineers proud everywhere.
Yeah, I'm blessed and fortunate to loosely be called a mountaineer. I like that. But my mountaineer were my mom and dad and my grandparents, and they came across those mountains. I mean, my ancestors did long before West Virginia was a state.
That's right. And you have to remind those folks out in California that West Virginia is its own state. They get that mixed up sometimes.
That's right.
You got to remind them there was this whole Civil War thing and it all separated out. West Virginia. If they come up to you and say, David, I hear you're from West Virginia. I have family in Richmond. You're going to have to correct them.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hey, you've been very generous with your time. We spent an hour chatting about television and movies and your books. Big thanks to Kathy and Patty and Ashley and the gang at Headline Books. I think you got a good gang there that publishes your work. They're very supportive of it.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful.
If you'd like to pick up a copy of any of David Selby's books, now's the time to do it at headlinebooks.com. That's headlinebooks.com as part of the Christmas extravaganza. David Selby, good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you again. God
and
bless.
Thanks to everyone who watched today. We really appreciate you being with us today. Happy Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas. Bye, everybody.
Yes, bye. Take care, everybody. Stay safe and be together. We can do it.